Voting. It is one of our most fundamental rights, a right at the heart of American democracy. It is a right which countless Americans have rallied for, advocated for, fought for, and died for. And yet it is a right which not all eligible Americans exercise.
Some people feel like their vote just don't count.
Time, money, convenience.
A lot of people make excuses about work and school.
Trying to find that space to get to the polling place can be a challenge for some folks.
No, I don't really believe a lot of the things that are said.
They gave up. They didn't see any change before, so they're not going to try again.
There is a disconnect between people's passion and fervor for these issues and not being willing to translate that into a vote.
I don't really think they understand that the people who are elected does affect your life, your livelihood.
So Time Warner Cable News partnered with the League of Women Voters of North Carolina to bring you this special presentation, Decision 2016, Make Your Vote Count, examining why and how to vote. Our purpose is simple, teaching you how to make your voice heard by making your vote count. I'm Tim Boyum. Thank you for joining us as we speak to elections officials, voting advocates, and voters from across North Carolina to discuss voting. It's a topic that many are passionate about.
We are all equal on Election Day. Everybody's voice counts on Election Day.
As things change and I watch the world change, I don't want to be a spectator. I want to be a part of what's happening, and my vote is my instrument to help me change things.
Change won't happen on its own. People need to get out and vote and make change happen.
I think it's the most fundamental way that you can express your position in a society. I think it's a kind of a gift we've been given to say, I want to have a voice.
Can't really complain about things that happen on a local level or on a national level if you aren't participating in the voting process.
It's our opportunity to affect ourselves, but also to affect all those people who don't have a voice.
As a veteran, I vote to keep our country strong. I vote because there are people who wear the uniform of our country who risk their lives every day for us, and I honor them each time I vote.
To begin with, we asked Time Warner Cable News reporter Andrew Sorensen to take a closer look at the most basic of all questions about voting.
Why should I vote?
You've probably seen movies or read books that start on a park bench. It's frankly overused. Writers do that because it's an easy way to make you pay attention to the conversation. I promise that's not what we're trying to do here.
We've been working with this park for many years.
We're here because Maxine Eves wanted to talk here at her beloved half-done Eastway Park in East Charlotte. They've been fighting since the early 2000s to wrap up this project, but her involvement in politics precedes the kids who will play here by generations.
To be a productive citizen in this country, you need to know, you need to vote.
Eves says she never had a problem voting in the early 60s, first voting for Johnson, the president who signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in 1964 and 65. In that respect, a county which prides itself for being at the forefront of liberty was ahead of its time and place. But there were other ways, like segregation, in which North Carolina lagged far behind.
We accepted it. We accepted a lot until we learned the process.
Eves believes the momentum of the 1960s started change here.
I'm not one that walked or protest. I am one that sat at the table, organized communities, organized groups, churches, and made a difference that kind of way.
But there's a problem in this country today. About 30% or more of eligible North Carolinians consistently don't vote. It's about twice that for a primary. Some of that is age. According to the Census Bureau, fewer than half of voters ages 18 to 34 have ever turned out for a presidential election since the 60s. It's often more like a third.
We need people to participate in our system because it is based on we the people.
Catawba College political scientist Michael Bitzer says it's not until we start paying property taxes and sending our kids to school that we see how things are done.
That's when they start to see the relevance of I need to have my voice shared in this process.
But the earlier you start voting, he says, the more likely you'll make a habit and see the changes you're looking for later. Not voting is also rooted in psychology and economics.
I have bought into that and said to myself, I don't deserve, this, or I felt, less because of how I was born or who I am or things that I can't change.
Voter Marjorie Molina grew up tough in a foster home. She got an associate's degree and did all she could with it.
I'm the typical, get a job, you'll go back to school later, 20-year-old who didn't do that until I turned 30.
Now she's back in school and politically active, but she understands why some people aren't.
There are people in our city who work all day long, and by the time they get off from work, the last thing they want to do is go stand in a long line to go and cast a vote.
Though she also remembers the cost of a vote.
I think I have a duty to vote. I'm an African American woman, so there are a lot of people who went ahead of me who paid a large price for me to be able to have that opportunity to vote.
Another reason people don't vote? Frustration. They think their one vote doesn't count. Elections Director Adam Reagan says he sees that argument get busted all the time.
I mean, look at Florida in 2000. Florida is a state of right around, I believe, 12 or 14 million, and less than 500 votes determined who won the presidency.
League of Women Voters U.S. President Elizabeth McNamara says she had that happen in her hometown recently. She puts it in harsh terms.
But the one thing we can say is if you don't go vote, you will not make a difference.
As the clock ticks down to North Carolina's primary, there's a reason to be hopeful. Reagan says a few more people are signing up for this primary. He credits North Carolina for moving up the voting date to March.
By May, oftentimes the presidential candidates have been decided.
But back to Eves, this park is proof that she's still fighting and using her vote. She's got a pretty good argument for using yours.
You're a taxpaying citizen, so why not? Make your money and your voice work for you.
It's important because that one vote is your seat in the conversation.
Of course, once you've answered the question of why to vote, the next question is obvious. And we asked Time Warner Cable News senior political reporter Loretta Beniti to answer the question.
How do I vote?
Well, there are a few things you need to know before you cast your ballot. Before anyone can head out to the polls, the first thing they need to do is register to vote. In order to be allowed to register, you have to be a U.S. citizen, live in North Carolina, and be 18 years old.
Actually, a 17-year-old can register and vote in the primary election if they'll be 18 by November 8th this year.
There are a few restrictions, though. You cannot be a convicted felon still in custody or on probation or parole. You must register to vote 25 days before Election Day, which means you needed to register by mid-February for the March primaries. If you don't know if you are registered, election officials say it's fairly easy to find out.
We have a statewide voter registration system, so if you come to our website, you can check your registration for any county in the state, and all of our county board of elections have sites as well.
We all want to be recognized.
If you want to find out if you're registered, you can log on to www.ncsbe.gov, the State Board of Elections website. There is a little wrinkle this year. Due to ongoing litigation, North Carolinians still have the option of using same-day registration during the early voting period. That means they could go to a one-stop early voting site and register and vote at the same time. That could change based on what happens in court. Now, when you register, you will need to choose if you want to register as a Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian. You could also choose to register as unaffiliated. What you choose will affect who you can vote for during the primary election.
North Carolina has semi-open primaries, so when you come in to vote, if you're a registered Republican, Democrat, or Libertarian, you'll vote those ballots for those parties. If you're an unaffiliated candidate, you can then choose which party's ballot you would like to vote for.
The first round of voting for 2016 is the primary elections, and political observers point out it is also when many other races will be decided.
Sadly, we don't have as many contested races in the fall as we would like to see. And so paying attention in that primary and paying attention to either because that's going to decide who represents you or it's going to decide who is eligible to represent you in the fall makes these elections really, really important.
In fact, in North Carolina, at the legislative level, 40 House members and 13 senators are running unopposed this year. And once the party nominee is decided, they will be put on the November general election ballot for the state.
Here are the key dates you need to know this election cycle here in North Carolina. To vote in the primary, you should already be registered. That deadline was on February 19th. One-stop early voting for the primary runs from March 3rd through March 12th. The state's primary election is on March 15th. North Carolina's congressional maps and races remain up in the air due to ongoing litigation, but state elections officials say you should still vote in those races on your ballot on March 15th. For the general election, absentee voting by mail starts on September 9th. The voter registration deadline is October 14th. One-stop early voting is from October 27th through November 5th, and this year the general election is on November 8th. We'll be right back with more key voting questions, including the facts on voting assistance and whether you'll need an ID when you head to the polls.
No matter how perfect the weather may be, that can change in the blink of an eye. That's why Time Warner Cable News has weather every 10 minutes. When you need the weather, we have the weather. Time Warner Cable News, your 24-hour local news channel, has weather every 10 minutes on the ones. 1 after, 11 after, 21 after. You get it. Your next local forecast is just a few minutes away. Weather on the ones, only on Time Warner Cable News.
Welcome back to our special decision 2016, Make Your Vote Count. A joint presentation by Time Warner Cable News and the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. Once again, I'm Tim Boym. As you may have figured out, voting can be complicated, from figuring out how to register to learning where and how to vote to determining who to vote for. There are many steps in the process. For some Americans, that process is even more complex, as Time Warner Cable News reporter Lenny Supal shows us as she answers the question.
What if I need help to vote? And what if I can't get to my polling place?
We want it to be easy, but we want voting to be for everybody that's qualified to vote. So that's why we go do that little bit extra. Not only because the law says, but simply because it's the right thing to do.
There are many ways to ensure you can cast your ballot on or before Election Day, from early voting to absentee ballots and various resources at your precinct.
The good thing about early voting is you can go to any one of the early voting sites and we're going to have your ballot style there.
Absentee ballots are also an option for someone who may be out of town during the election. The voter or their near relative must submit a request by 5 p.m. on the Tuesday before Election Day.
Once the voter gets it, your clock's still ticking, okay? So then you have to get it back to our office, okay? The most important part is it must be postmarked on Election Day or it must be received back in our office by 5 p.m. on Election Day.
The absentee ballot must be signed by the voter and 2 witnesses before it's turned in. It can also be notarized. Aside from early voting and absentee by mail, there are plenty of options available for you at your precinct on Election Day. For voters with hearing and visual disabilities, there is a touchscreen device to help you mark your ballot.
One of the devices we have is the AutoMark. The AutoMark is not a tabulator, but it is simply a device used to assist anybody that may be visually impaired or have any special needs, maybe even an enlarged ballot, and it will help voters by filling in the oval for them so they can vote just like anybody else. Once the ballot is in the machine, the voter is actually able to use it several different ways. They can zoom in on the ballot to see larger text. They can also change the contrast on the ballot. And in some cases, if a voter is blind, there's other options, such as they can use headphones, and they actually have the option of completely turning the screen off.
Curbside voting is also an option for those who are unable to go inside their precinct due to age or physical disabilities.
They bring the machine out to the curb or to your car, and it's already loaded with all the information from your precinct. And all you do is just cast your ballot.
Any voter that is qualified due to age or physical disability will be required to sign an affidavit. It is a very time-consuming process, but again, it's just another step in the process to make sure that every voter does get the chance to vote.
It's assistance to make your voting experience as easy as possible.
There are some new requirements for voting in North Carolina that you need to know before Election Day comes around. One change at the center of much controversy is North Carolina's new voter ID law, which is in place for this year for the first time. We turn to Time Warner Cable News senior political reporter Loretta Beniti again to break down what this law means for voters, asking the question,
will I need ID to vote?
Well, 2016 marks when many of North Carolina's new voting laws go into effect. Most importantly, starting with the March 15th primary, you will need to show an acceptable form of photo identification before you cast your ballot. Among other things, some of those acceptable forms are a North Carolina driver's license or identification card, a passport, or an identification card or driver's license from another state.
This election, voters will be asked to show a photo ID at the polls.
You can log on to voterid.nc.gov, where the State Board of Elections has a complete list of all the IDs that are accepted at the polls.
You can get a free ID at the DMV if you don't have one. And if you can't get one, there are options to vote. You can vote absentee by mail, which doesn't require a photo ID. And if someone can't obtain an acceptable photo ID, they can go to the polls and they can fill out a declaration explaining that they have a reasonable impediment to getting one, and they'll be able to vote as well.
Sign your name. Poll workers have been training for the change across the state.
Will be counted as long as they're eligible and registered to vote.
And all of them will be equipped with the same information to assist voters on Election Day, with hopes, they say, of helping ease into this transition.
We're intending to have some greeters to let people know before they ever get here that that photo ID is required this year, and also that there are exceptions if you don't have that.
Taking a closer look at the exceptions. Last year, lawmakers passed an amendment to the voter ID law which allows for a reasonable impediment. Those are listed as a lack of proper documentation, family obligations, transportation problems, work schedule, or illness or disability.
They can vote a provisional ballot, and there's a form for them to fill out that says, I have a reasonable impediment, and it pretty much includes a lot of different things, and there's even a place in there for other. And if they have a reasonable impediment, they're also going to be given an opportunity to present some types of ID, which is one of the HAVA documents that we were talking about, or a voter registration card that we issued them, which nobody keeps, but or they can provide their date of birth and the last 4 digits of their Social Security, and if it we'll look at it and see if it matches what we have on file. If somebody signs that affidavit and presents us that information, then we'll count their provisional ballot.
Voting advocates say it's important for voters to familiarize themselves with these rules.
These barriers are only barriers if they prevent people from voting. And the more prepared folks are, folks still have time to get what they need to make sure that they go out and vote.
If you're someone who will need to utilize curbside or absentee voting, there are also some voter rules to keep in mind. For curbside voting, you will need to either show an acceptable photo ID or an acceptable document with your name and address, such as a utility bill, bank statement, or government paycheck. Photo ID is not required for absentee voting.
Absentee voting by mail changed in 2014 so that you do have to have 2 witnesses that sign it, or you can have a notary. That was a new change.
And as election season ramps up, election officials say don't worry too much over the new voting laws.
I want to encourage everybody to get out and vote. And even if you don't get an ID, come and vote anyway. There's exceptions, there's things that you can do to still be able to cast a ballot, and there's also a lot of information out about how to get those free IDs.
When we come back, we'll walk you through what you need to know when you arrive at the polls and provide some valuable voter resources.
Do you know a high school senior who excels athletically, academically, and is active in their community? Time Warner Cable News is taking nominations from coaches, teachers, administrators, and counselors in local high schools for the Time Warner Cable News Scholar Athlete. Selected students will be profiled on Time Warner Cable News. Visit twcnews.com and click on the Scholar Athlete button for more information. Let's highlight these students' great achievements. The Time Warner Cable News Scholar Athlete.
Thanks again for joining us for our special presentation, Decision 2016, Make Your Vote Count, brought to you by Time Warner Cable News and the League of Women Voters of North Carolina. So you've decided to vote, you've registered and researched the candidates. Now you're ready to head to the polls, ID in hand. Time Warner Cable News reporter Lenny Supal answers the question.
What do I need to know at the polls?
To me, it's that most sacred right you have as a U.S. citizen is the right to vote. So it does deserve the focus and attention that we give it.
As voters get ready to make their way to the polls, there's a lot of common questions they may have.
We got to get that word out there where people understand that it really is an easy process.
So to make things a little easier for you, we're taking you step by step through the process. We're here at a voting precinct, and on election day, the first thing you would do is make your way into the voting enclosure before you're able to cast your ballot. Starting this year, you'll need to have your ID with you in order to vote. Then, you'll make your way to the registration table where you'll be asked your name, your address, and party affiliation.
And what is your party affiliation?
I'm unaffiliated.
Some of the common questions precinct officials hear.
Am I in the right place? Why do I have to say my name and address and party affiliation? It is in the North Carolina general statutes that each voter has to verbally state their name, address, and for the primaries, their party affiliation.
Once you receive your official ballot, you'll make your way to the voting booth, and that's where you'll fill in the candidates of choice. The last and final step of your voting experience is to insert your ballot into the tabulator. A voting official will help you with the process. Of course, the voting process can differ from county to county, but if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. And remember, no one will be turned away at the polls.
Don't ever forget that one of your resources also are our precinct officials. We train them, we work with them, and that's what we're here for, is to make sure we're serving all of our voters.
If you still have voting questions, here are some useful online voter resources. Vote411.org is the website run by the League of Women's Voters, where you'll find a wealth of voting information and can even build your own ballot with an online voter's guide. NCSBE.gov is the website for the North Carolina State Board of Elections, which can provide you information on everything from whether you're registered to where your polling place is located. Thank you for joining us for this special presentation, Decision 2016, Make Your Vote Count. We hope you do plan to make your vote count this election year. We leave you with the words of voters and voting advocates from across our state who, no matter their politics or their background, all agree on one thing. It's time we all make our voices heard by making our votes count.
There's no democracy when people don't actively participate.
I vote to change the dynamics in North Carolina.
You know, that's a real privilege, and a lot of people have worked very hard to get the vote, whether you're a woman, whether you're a minority, and I think, you know, it's just a responsibility to pay back.
When I walk into that voter booth, I know that I'm having an impact on what happens in this country as a whole, in this state.
This is where my hope is, and I hope that we can, you know, become a better institution, a better, you know, democracy.
I go to the polls to be heard.
This is something that we have to preserve, that we need to be careful with, that not everyone in the world has it, and we need to stay very involved in our democracy.
Everyone should use their vote, and when you do use your vote, you are making the system work a little bit better.
We're facing some real challenges in this country, some real challenges in this state. And it's time for us to really get serious about, you know, who we're putting in office.
Don't just go to the polls to just check a block, you know, that's not voting, see?
There is a legacy of, in America for everyone to be free and equal and to have the opportunity to make a change in their community. And there are a lot of people in this world that don't have that opportunity and who would do a lot to have that.
Not only can we affect our own lives and have a say over, you know, how our country develops and how our, and state and communities develop, but through America's world policy and through the elected officials that we vote for, we have a way to affect the lives of those people all over the world who don't have a voice.
I would rather control my own destiny than to have someone else make that decision for me because I didn't vote. And everything that we do is, our life is a series of stories. I don't want somebody else writing my story. I want to be able to write it myself.
This is our day. This is the voters' day. Elections aren't about candidates. Elections are about voters.
Thank you for watching Decision 2016. Make your vote count. A joint presentation of Time Warner Cable News and the League of Women Voters of North Carolina.